I'd like to call this meeting back to order, and for those that are willing and able, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have some introductions. Good evening, I'm Di McBride, the board president, and to my left is
Bo Wright, Superintendent of Schools.
George DeMarteau, attorney for the district.
Good evening, Nikki LaPlaca, board member.
Hi, James O'Brien, board member.
Pat McHugh, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and School Accountability.
Dina Wilson, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
Good evening, Andy Whitmore, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations.
Good evening, Neilana Selm, Assistant Superintendent of Student and Family Services.
Hello, everyone. May Abdullah, board member.
Good evening, Karen Flanagan, School District Clerk.
Hello, Anne-Marie Straczynski, board vice president.
And joining us via a laptop here this evening virtually is Mrs. Jennifer Laird. She could not be with us tonight, but can join us from her home on her laptop. So we're glad that she's able to be with us in that fashion. Agenda review. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda? All right, seeing none. Any announcements? All right. That will bring us then to...
Anne-Marie, I can't hear it all.
This is going to be a challenge because even though I'm talking into a microphone, she can't hear me. So we'll do our best. Can you hear me now, Mrs. Laird?
I think maybe if we boosted the monitors on stage a little bit, that would help. Speaking as a former sound engineer.
All right, we'll keep going. We'll give it a shot, see how she's doing. All right, next would normally be the board member report from our student representatives, but I don't see either student here this evening, so I'm sure they have something very important going on. They're very active and very busy young ladies, so we'll catch up to them in the new year.
Cannot hear it.
I think they're working on it.
All right. Mrs. Laird still is not able to hear, so we'll just keep mentioning till she can hear. This would bring us to the public forum on our agenda. This is the time for audience members to address the board regarding items of interest that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak to something that is on an item on the agenda, we would ask you to please raise your hand at that time while the item is under discussion. Normally, if it is being discussed, we would have our conversation here at the table before I would acknowledge anyone in the audience. We ask that you keep all your comments to about 3 minutes time, as our agenda is extremely full again this evening, as we do have a workshop. Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to speak during the public forum? Please come up here to the microphone. State your name and address, please, for the record.
My name is Kim Bodden, and I'm at 6898 East River Road in Rush. This letter is actually longer, but I shortened it to try and keep it around 3 minutes.
Thank you.
A letter written on November 9th by Dr. Clayton Baker and 3 other physicians to the Pittsford Board of Education states that depression, anxiety, and suicidality are all on the rise. This rise is a direct result of our children being unnecessarily denied their normal lives and education due to prolonged school closures, online learning, and the social isolation and alienation caused by our schools failing to provide our children a normal living environment. Later, he goes on to say that if schools are not fully opened and soon, the risk of suicide and drug abuse amongst our students will continue to rise. On November 2nd, the Los Angeles Times stated, an increase in grades of D and F in the Los Angeles Unified School District among middle and high school students is a troubling sign of the toll that distance learning and the coronavirus crisis is taking on children, especially those who are members of low-income families. On November 13th, the Statesman News Network in Texas reported that Round Rock and Hayes have seen a double-digit rise in failure rates. On November 25th, the New York Daily News reported that Fairfax County, Virginia, encountered an 83% increase in failing grades. On December 5th, ABC News reported that school districts from coast to coast have reported the number of students failing classes has risen by as many as 2 or 3 times. They also reported that to remedy this problem, schools are changing grading policies to make the classes easier. That helps our schools while damaging our children. These reported failing grades and the reported increase in anxiety, depression, and suicidality are all evidence of the negative impacts associated with our children not being in school in person 5 days per week. These decisions are not based on science. If they were, the state would have allowed schools to be fully opened after such low positivity rates were encountered when testing was performed last month. Health officials and health organizations support schools being open. In July, the CDC stated it is critically important for our public health to open schools this fall. On August 21st, the president of the Academy of Pediatrics emphasized the important role of school in supporting children's health and well-being, even beyond academics. On November 29th, Dr. Fauci stated, the default position should be as best as possible, within reason, to keep the children in school and get them back to school. 3 professors of medicine from Stanford, Oxford, and Harvard universities wrote and issued the Great Barrington Declaration, recommending a focused protection approach to managing the risks of COVID. Focused protection focuses on the vulnerable population that does not include school-aged children who currently have been bearing the burden of controlling a disease from which they face little to no risk. Instead, those who are not vulnerable should immediately be allowed to resume life as normal. Schools and universities should be open for in-person teaching. Extracurricular activities such as sports should be resumed. To date, the Great Barrington Declaration has been signed by over 43,000 medical and public health scientists and medical practitioners. The Declaration thus does not represent a fringe view within the scientific community. The State Department of Health requires social distancing wherever possible, and face coverings when social distancing is not possible. Both are not required by state, if not possible. It's time to push back on the state and open our schools. Advocate for our children who are suffering, who have been the convenient population to test, who have been the population who is at low risk of harm from this virus, but at very high risk for long-term consequences of this approach to education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, could you please fill out one of the cards that's up on the table out in the hall for me and leave it with me? And if you'd like to leave your letter, I will take that as well.
I'm going to send the full version to the board.
Okay.
As well as our local officials and state officials.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please come up to the microphone. State your name and address. And also, if you could, out on the table is a card. If you can fill that out and make sure we get it, that's helpful for the records up here.
Okay, mine's pretty short. I'm a concerned parent as well. I have a senior this year, and I also have a child who was in the RH system.
I'm
who's
sorry, your
now-
name?
I'm sorry, Tracy Everett at 11 Don Valley Drive. So I'm just concerned about my son as a senior year, that basically I've never seen him quite so depressed and quite so withdrawn, and it's just really hard to watch as a parent. And I just feel like no one's really advocating for these kids. I see all this RH Strong and, oh, we can do this, and that's great. But I don't think that's really what's happening here, and there's a whole contingent of kids who are struggling, and it's tough to watch as a parent. And I just feel like as school board members, do your jobs, fight back. Like, say that it's okay for our kids to come back 5 days a week. If you want us to follow the guidelines, we'll follow them. But for heaven's sakes, let's give our kids at least a final semester of their senior year. It's hard to watch. They're never going to see these kids again. My kid is going to go in the military. He may never see these kids again. And this is how he's going to see them? This is going to be his lasting memory? It's killing me as a parent. And I just wish you would fight back and advocate. That's all I wish for.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? All right, we will move forward then to the consent agenda items for routine matters. This is the property tax collections, refunds of taxes report, CSE, CPSE recommendations, and minutes from meetings. Although those minutes, I did not see them attached, so Mrs.,
I'm sorry, which minutes?
the minutes from, in our board docs.
They're attached.
They
They
are
were there?
now.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
I took care of that,
Okay,
yes.
great, thank you. They are now posted in the board docs.
Anne Marie, we need to stop. Anne Marie. Diane, I cannot hear you at all. I heard the speakers, I heard Ms. Bowden, and I believe Ms. Everett. I heard them, but I cannot hear you at all.
Okay. Give us a moment, please. All right, so we're having still some difficulties here that Mrs. Laird cannot hear anything, and without her being able to hear, we can't quantify her being present. So what can be our resolution for that? Anybody have anything back there at the soundboard? No problem. Okay.
My thought was that she can go on YouTube, and there might be a delay in what she's hearing.
Someone's coming to look.
All right.
Like, I could hear Nerlon, but I don't think Andy's was necessarily on.
I'm sorry for the delay, but this is really important.
Well, as Mrs. Laird pointed out, I believe she could hear our public forum speakers just fine, and I can tell that that mic on the floor is coming through the monitors much louder than our mics up here. The mics up here are just, it's all echo, but the mic on the floor is coming through nice and clear. So I know there's feedback issue, and I'm hearing a little bit of feedback right now.
That's because I got everything, I'm almost maxed out on the monitors for all your individual mics. It goes too loud.
Should we take a moment to pause? I'm sorry to the folks that are watching us live. We are having some technical issues with one of our board members. And so we're going to just take a moment while we see we can get that resolved. It's important that she's able to participate with us.
Is she able to stream the meeting on YouTube Live?
I'm not sure.
On another device? Yeah.
Yes?
Somebody's trying to come up with another suggestion, Jennifer.
Put this by the laptop?
I do not want to, but, that's,
suggest that you watch a live stream and then call Anne Marie if she has questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
See your headset? If you lay the speaker in front of wherever the microphone is on the
She's
laptop.
muted, so I'm gonna let you.
No, on whichever laptop she's on.
All right, we're going to continue to try and work on a solution. We suggested to her that she go to the live stream, and then when she has questions, to call into one of the board members, and she'll repeat the questions. That's probably the best we can do. Technology is a wonderful thing, and it's a frustrating thing, so we go with the flow. All right. You folks okay if I keep going? And can you hear? All right, we were on our consent agenda items. That's item 7A through E. I'll take a motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. All right. You still with us, Jennifer? Okay, great. This brings us to item 9. This is the ratification of the coalition contract. I will take a motion to approve. I have Mrs. Lepaka. Mr. O'Brien is a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. This is going to bring us to our workshop on special education. Mrs. Laird will do our best to get you in. Again, if you catch the live stream, you can call in your questions to Mrs. Straczynski, and we'll go from there. But if you can still hear, we'll keep going this way. We are unable at this time to postpone the special education workshop. So we're going to move forward with that.
Are you ready for me?
Yes, and thank you.
Okay.
Underneath this, we're all smiling through this.
All right, can you hear me with the mask okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right, so first of all, thank you for inviting us to the board to present this workshop. We appreciate this opportunity. I am Jessica Bailey. I am the Director of Special Education for Rush-Henrietta, and I also have with me my coordinators. Jennifer Cardinelli is the CPSE K-6 coordinator, and Dave Pat is our secondary and transition coordinator. So as you know, sorry, I'm working the mic and the computer and everything else. So as you know, special education became a district priority in the 2017-2018 school year. And since that time, our district priority has changed a little bit. What you see here is the new and improved district priority. And what we really did was focus the priority on where we have a direct impact through the IEP. And an IEP is an individualized education plan that is determined to support students with disabilities in their education. It is a legal document that we are required by law to make sure is compliant, and we provide what the committee recommends. The committee is made up of the parent, school staff, related service providers, and a school psychologist, and at times an administrator from the Department of Special Education. So our focus tonight is our district priority. So we will talk a little bit about our classification rate, the least restrictive environment, or LRE, and graduation rates. So our department oversees all the Section 504 accommodation plans and IDEA Part 200, which includes IEPs. The difference between a 504 and an IEP truly is the accommodation. So a 504 provides accommodations such as a seat toward the front of the room so that a child with vision issues could see, or away from the door for a child with ADHD that's just easily distracted. The IEP provides specially designed instruction that allows children to receive that instruction and close gaps for their learning. We make it a point of making sure that all students are considered our gen ed students first. And so we want to make sure that all of our students have the opportunity to engage in and participate in activities that any other child has, whether they have an IEP or not. So one of the things that we have seen throughout our time here is that the numbers of 504, those accommodation plans, have really increased significantly. And we don't really talk about them as much as we do IEPs, but they are certainly as important and as legally compliant as the IEPs. So in that time, since our time here, we have seen an increase up to from 237 to 280 504 plans. And while that doesn't seem like a huge number, that is a lot when you consider everything that goes into that. Again, they are just like IEPs. We have annual meetings. All the notifications need to go out. So that is an undertaking for our buildings and our school psychologist and my office as well. So over the last few years, our total enrollment, and again, this information comes from our New York State report card. So our total enrollment has seen some ups and downs, but for the most part has remained fairly neutral. The average is around a little over 5,800. So why is that important? That is important because during that time, our special ed numbers have increased significantly. So our students with disabilities, as you can see, has increased quite a bit. This year, we are projected to have 677 at this for the 2018-2019 school year. Or sorry, it's 2019-2020 school year. And that number is projected because those numbers aren't official yet. And there is, as you know, a lag in the data for the New York State report card. So over the course of these 8 years, that's an increase of 135 students with IEPs. And again, that has a lot of ramifications for related service providers, for instruction and sections of special class. So as our rate for students with disabilities goes up and our overall number stays the same, we see that overall rate increase. So that is why you see a big difference from that 9.4 to where we are now, over 10%. So that trend, again, as you see, what the red numbers underneath are the specific numbers that are our classification numbers according to that New York State report card. So what contributes to some of those trends? A lot of, as Bo had said, when students come in, parents feel that we do a really good job of supporting our students with disabilities, and I think that's important for us to know. We are just outside of the Rochester City school limits, so that is another caveat for people. We're that close proximity to a lot of different things. And the tax rate in Rush-Henrietta is certainly welcoming to many families in Monroe County. It is important to note that there is no state threshold for identification, but there is a recommendation. So they definitely want to see our numbers below 11%. We are, as you can see, inching up to that 11%. So as we look at student movement, this is a slide that is just a snapshot for last year specifically. So our overall, as Andy says, our overall net for students that move out and students that move in is 15. But where the significance lies is that the great majority of students that come in, as you can see, are at that K-6 level. And these students tend to come into us with a greater need than the students that leave at 10, 12. So that has an impact on our related service providers, and again, with our low class sizes, that is an impact at K-6. So we want to, make sure that that's understood, that has a difference in the impact for students with disabilities across the district. It is always a moving target. We have certainly looked at the ebb and flow of students that have moved into the district. There is no real pattern. We have ups and downs, again, just as we said earlier, but that is an important piece to keep in mind. It is also important to note that during our tenure here, we have seen a significant increase in the amount of declassification. When I first got here, we had some conversations, especially at the secondary, about declassification. And when we were talking to staff about that, they were asking questions like, what do I do for this child? I can't come up with a goal. And so we would talk about it, and we would dive into if you aren't able to create a goal that requires specially designed instruction, does that child still require an IEP? And one teacher literally said to me, no one's asked me that before. So as you can see, in 2017, 2018, we declassified 16 students. That's pretty significant. And as you can see, in the last 3 years, there has been double-digit declassification rates. This year, we've already declassified 2 students. And again, it's not that we're trying to take them off of our docket. We're trying to ensure that they are able to use those tools and are more independent and more effective in their learning. Our goal for every student that walks into our building is to graduate on time with their peers, their general education peers, without an IEP. And we instill that in our staff, both related service providers and special ed teachers. This declassification, though, is a double-edged sword because we declassify our highest performing students. So when we are looking at students that are starting to meet grade level targets or exceeding some of their goals, we have that conversation to say, have we done our job? I tell my staff all the time, your job is to work yourself out of a job. I promise you there are kindergartners every year that come in that need our support. So certainly, as we declassify our highest performing students, we're also classifying students that are coming in or being identified as having a disability. So that, again, is that double-edged sword that we are releasing our more independent students and taking on some students that need more supports. Our second focus for the district priority is the least restrictive environment, or LRE. This is a designation and an indicator that we are monitored by. And again, this information is reported from the New York State report card. The ICOP model went into effect in the 18-19 school year. So as you can see, that is where an increase in our LRE for our students with disabilities, the goal is to attend 80% or more of their day with their general education peers. For the last year, 4 years before that, we were on a downward trend. As soon as we implemented the ICOP model, you see a significant jump in students that attend 80% or more of their day with their general education peers. We have had several conversations with our Office of Special Education State Ed and our regional partnership, and they've asked us, what's the difference? Why are you guys now going in the right direction? And one of those things that we can proudly say is the implementation of the integrated co-teaching. Students that were in special class are now with their general education peers throughout the day on a much more extended basis. And we continue to look at different ways to allow students to be in those gen ed classes more often. In 18-19, you also see an increase in the students of disabilities that are in separate settings. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. That was the year, if you recall, that we added a group home and several students moved into the district that were already in out-of-district placements. We do have regular, obviously, annual meetings on those students, and we are always asking those questions. Just because a neighboring district put them in an out-of-district placement doesn't mean that that's where they remain. So we want to make sure that we're providing them opportunities to potentially come back. So at each CSE meeting, whether it's a new CSE meeting or an annual review, the committee is charged with the least restrictive environment. And the continuum of services that needs to be considered obviously ranges from least restrictive to most restrictive. And we really ask teachers and related service providers, out-of-district placements, and parents all the time, why not? If they are in even an ICOT, why can't they go to consultant teacher? What's holding them back? If they're in an out-of-district placement, What's holding them back from coming back to our program? And we really focus on, okay, then what's the goal? What goal is associated with helping them reach that next level? The committee's job is to ensure the least restrictive environment to the greatest extent possible. In fact, New York State requires us to do this, and in fact, in the regs, it says that students cannot be taken out of a general ed classroom solely on the need for modification in curriculum. And as you know, we are doing this not only in person and through a hybrid model, but we are also ensuring this continuum of services in the in the Remote Learning Academy. We have approximately 136 students with IEPs that are attending the RLA. That's about 21% of our students, so that was a significant change in our programming and placements as we go along. Those students range in needs from related services only to our New York State alternative assessment. So that's a wide range of not only programming and instruction, but related services and other needs. And again, we have been working very closely with the Office of Special Education and our regional partnership and other districts to ensure that there is consistency and compliance with all the regulations that have gone along. We have shared information with regarding RLA through a parent night this fall. Information has been posted on our district website. We will be continuing to host a few more parent nights throughout the year. And we are working with our staff and parents to just keep those lines of communication open. So in our continuum for the Remote Learning Academy, CT looks very similar to how it looks in the hybrid and traditional model. The special ed teacher works with the general education teacher and the student to provide direct and indirect support for students. ICOT is a little bit more difficult in the Remote Learning Academy because, as we know, technology makes it a little difficult for more than one person to speak at a time, and to have those ongoing conversations, which is critical to ICOT. But we have been working with staff to ensure that they're able to give the best learning experience possible. Our teachers are providing small group, our paras are supporting smaller group learning and individual learning opportunities as well. For special class, it's the same, it's along that same line. Students are learning from a certified special ed teacher. They're receiving their instruction in that special class. They are still required to meet grade level standards in that special class. In the NISA class, which is the alternative assessment, again, our certified special ed teachers are providing their specific instruction to smaller groups of students. We're also seeing a lot of co-treatment with our related service providers. So our SPOT, which is speech and OT, are continuing to work together to embed services as well as we can in that remote learning environment. And again, we have related service only students that continue to receive their speech, OT, PT, and music therapy. So more specifics for the Remote Learning Academy. We have 8+ FTE teachers assigned to the Remote Learning Academy. 4.3 are K-6, 3.0 are 7 through 12. We have 3.25 dedicated just for our NISA students. And we have 2.2 speech and 1.0 OT. Our staffing, as you know, has changed several times throughout because our students are ebbing and flowing. And our greatest need for related services actually lies in the Remote Learning Academy, which we did not anticipate. We never would have thought that we would have had that many students with IEPs choose to attend remote. It has required a 2.2 speech allocation, and for OT, because it splintered our occupational therapists throughout the district so much, we've actually had to contract with BOCES for an additional 0.6 in order to provide our students with the occupational therapy needs that are prescribed on IEPs. Our staff has done an amazing job. They really have been very flexible. They've gone above and beyond to try to support our students to the best of our abilities. We meet weekly with RLA. We meet as a department, and we meet, part of that is dedicated to the Remote Learning Academy administration We talk about student, staff, and how to continue to meet the needs of our students. Teachers are providing instruction at multiple grade levels, which in person we had tried to avoid, but with the wide array of people and students in different grade levels, we've had to cross some of those lines, and our staff has stepped up to that challenge. We've collapsed 3 sections of NYSA. As I said, a great deal of our NYSA students have chosen to go remote. So we've done some shifting around, and again, our staff and parents and students have stepped up to that challenge. And there continues to be a need for executive function and organizational support and work completion when students are remote, because there's no one right there to help them with those pieces. So looking at this year, our continuum of service, we continue to have related service only students in all 4 levels of our instruction. Those services are being provided both in person and virtually. Students that were making progress during closure toward IEP goals, staff has been encouraged to continue those services virtually if that is supported, because then they aren't missing that time in the in-person instruction. ICOT, as you can see, is at the 4 levels with 4th grade only at the intermediate schools. And this has also allowed for us to have smaller students, smaller levels of students in special class, and has allowed students to attend their home school. So for the first time ever, every student with an IEP at Roth is a Roth student, and that's important for us. The 15-1, as students are working through those ready-to-learn behaviors at our earliest levels, we are still having a few classes at K3 and 4-6. We are working on ensuring ways that students can be in those 15-1s where they need to be and afford them opportunities to be in the general ed classes as much as possible. So maybe a student goes to the 15-1 for math, but is in a general ed class for the rest of their day. So that is also increasing our students, their opportunities to be provided general ed or instruction with their general education peers. And the NYSA classes are the 12-1-4, and those are our alternately assessed students. And again, those are located at Leary for the primary level, at Vollmer for the intermediate level, Berger for junior high, and right here at the high school and at the Webster Learning Center is our transition program. So the next slide is our 5-year projection for our special ed programming. As you can see, we've put some adjustments for the ICOT for the pilot and expanding that. Next year, we're hoping to have ICOT at K5 and then 7-12. And then in the 2022-23 year, we're hoping to have a K-12 full continuum of special education, K-12. And again, removing special class from 7-8 has allowed students to attend their home school. And 4th grade has a much smaller special class. And again, even students at Sherman and Vollmer are able to attend their attendance school instead of having to go across town to another program. So as you know, we were not able to collect state and local data through the closure. So we relied on obtaining some qualitative data for you, and perception is everything. So we recently sent out a survey to stakeholders, to building administrators, to special ed and general education teachers and related service providers. And we asked them simply a few questions around academic and social emotional growth. For students with IEPs, 37.2% indicated that they were making less than expected gains. That was certainly a concern for us, so we reached out to some of the participants in the survey and asked them, talk to us about that, because that was not what we expected to hear. And a lot of them said that they made those decisions based on our current times, and not having students with us all the time, that definitely swayed their conversation. And so we wanted to make sure that we are looking into ways to support their needs outside of the in-person instruction. But we also didn't want to lose sight of the fact that 63%, almost 63% of them still felt that students were making the same gains or better than expected gains academically, and 81.4% socially. Those are big numbers that we thought were really important for students with disabilities. And we're often asked about the impact of ICOT for students in the general education. And as you can see, that staff indicated that 18.6% said that they were making less than expected gains. But again, 81.4% felt that they were making equal or greater gains academically, and almost 84% felt that they were making equal to or greater than social gains. We also asked them, what evidence did you use? How did you determine that? What helped you make that decision? So they talked about district common assessments and Regents exams results, obviously not able to do the Regents exams this year. But the big thing was IEP goals. So students that they're monitoring their goals and continuing to do that, some of them said that they were actually exceeding their goals that they had set forth this year. They were looking at some work examples and anecdotal information. So the quote on here came directly from a teacher that said that they're meeting their goals earlier than expected. And MAPS test, again, that we had done in the fall, they felt that they had achieved higher than they thought they would. So last couple of highlights, and then I'm going to pass it over to Jen for a second. They also felt that the classroom discussion and participation, both for general ed and students with disabilities, has increased significantly. They've said that we've had some students that they've never thought would earn a diploma that have. And they felt that having that heterogeneous class makeup supported an increase in rigor and success for all students. And again, a special ed teacher that had taught special class said that she had seen growth that she didn't see happening in a special class. We do have a couple areas that we want to continue to focus on. And one of them is that transition to 7th grade. As we switched to the ICOT, as we adjusted the ICOT, I should say, at the junior high level, there was a lot of concern that we heard coming back, as I'm sure you did as well, about whether or not students were the right fit for a general ed class, and that they might not just belong ready, or they're not ready for that class. That is not what we're hearing anymore. When we go into 7th grade classrooms, and even yesterday I had a meeting with some administrators, and the first question out of their mouth lately has been, are students in 6th grade still in special class? How do we get them out of there before now? That is a huge shift in culture that we're hearing from our staff. And I think they want those students to be supported. They feel like they can support them better when they're not in that special class leading up to 6th grade and then hit the junior high, and it's a whole new world. So that is an area that we will continue to focus on. We are continuing to focus to provide the best services in both the hybrid and the RLA models. We are continuing to provide professional development as much as we can, and we are starting to have some conversations around modified curriculum assessments. We want to be very careful, though, that is for very select students, and we want to move very slowly so that we are making sure that we're making the right decisions around that. Again, we continue to make some shifts. I personally have taken over grades 4 through 6, that CSE process. Not because Jen isn't capable of doing that, but because that is a very pivotal point. That seems to be where a lot of decisions are made that have a significant impact on that secondary line. So I'll be taking that over so that I can be on the front line with that. Again, we're meeting weekly with RLA and doing everything that we can to support our staff and students. And now I'm going to let Jen talk a little bit more about primary.
All right, can you guys hear me? So at the primary level, when we started ICOT, this is our 3rd year, and we really looked at the numbers. So what was really impressive to me was the number of students that are in the gen ed setting.
Can you step closer to the microphone? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
That's okay. Is that better?
Thank you.
Okay. Can I take this down? So looking at the elementary numbers, the biggest impact for me were the students that are now being educated in the gen ed setting. So just at K2 in the 18-19 school year, we had 19 students in the special class, and 23 of them are now in the integrated co-teaching program. And as that program has continued, our numbers of students in the special class has remained smaller. So the next year we had 20 students in special class and 42 students being educated in the general education setting. And again, this year we added a grade. We're at K4. 37 students are in a special class and 56 are being educated alongside their peers. So what does that mean? What does the research say? What are our teachers saying? It's saying that they're getting high expectations all day long, right? We're shooting for grade level standards. With 2 teachers in the room, we're able to do small groups, we're able to differentiate. The peer relationships, what the gen ed students are learning, they're learning empathy, they're learning how to support students. The special ed students are seeing what good learning's looking like, sounding like, the role models. And the teachers, what they're learning from each other is amazing. When we talk to the teachers, they're saying time. Everybody wants more time, right? There's only so much time in the day. But again, what they're seeing, what they're hearing from the parents, both parents, gen ed parents, special ed parents, are really enjoying the experience. They love the small groups. They love what their kids are coming home with. Students with disabilities are out in public and other families know them, right? They're not sheltered in this little special class. They're out there. The communication skills are improving because they're hearing language, they're using language, they're being encouraged to talk with their peers, to talk with others. So yes, we have great qualitative data coming at us. Our numbers are going to be reflecting in our district priority with our LRE. That's improving. It's going in the right direction. Last year, we presented what is the impact of students in gen ed and on that graduation rate. So we had the chart. Students that are in integrated settings have a higher likelihood of graduating, okay? And so we're starting it young, and hopefully those supports, we can get these kids into a CT model, not more support as they get older. So that's our hope. So Dave's gonna talk a little bit about secondary.
All right, good evening. Is this close enough? Am I good? All right, thanks, Nikki. Bigger space, sorry. So as we look at secondary, we talked about at one point really what was going to happen with the special class and really the impact on ICOT. So when we start following that data, we had, we had 33 students, in special class. 31 students in special class in 7th and 8th grade when I first started, and we eliminated special class then. Those students are now in 10th and 11th grade. So if we follow that data and look at that, we find that there are 25 students that are still Rush-Henrietta students. Of those 25, we have 2 that attend out-of-district programming. Most importantly, though, 88% of those students, or 22 of that total group still, is on track for 4-year graduation. So when we talk 4-year graduation, we mean that they start 9th grade with their peers and they graduate in those 4-year marks. Graduations can be a complicated factor that we don't have to dive into more here, but we can at a different time. Most importantly, too, we do have 3 students that are not on track for graduation, but we see that they are high-need students and families that have significant childhood adverse childhood experiences, those ACEs that you may have heard in different pieces. So again, our students are on track. We don't want to lose sight of those 3 students, but when we look at that impact of ICOT at the secondary level, we see that those students are on track for graduation. We need to follow that through, and that will be part of our district priority work as we go forward. We need to keep those numbers in mind. Some of the pieces that we used for the decision to eliminate special class was teacher, parent, and student feedback back in 2017 and 18. At that time, we had teachers and students, even parents, saying they weren't making the progress that we needed to see. So it wasn't a decision based on LRE need, it was a decision based on students, and that's why we moved towards the ICOT. And so far, those students are making progress. So like I said, we talk about, is this working? Where does the data tell us so far? What's it show? So in most factors, yes, this is working. We see that student achievement. We see the graduation rate increasing. And we'll look at that at a different slide. And we project that those students in those 10th, 11th grades right now will have that high chance for four-year graduation. It's also a good opportunity to say that our teachers and our staff have done a phenomenal job supporting students. It was a big change for some of those students, but they made that transition seamless. So I also want to make sure we recognize the work of all those people too. It's been absolutely phenomenal what they do. We always still have work to do. That's a given. When we look at some of these, we know that transition to 7th grade needs more attention. This is the second or third time you've heard it tonight. It's not a major problem, but we look at the fact that students are leaving a special class model and an intermediate model, and they're jumping to junior high and that co-taught model for most of those students. So there's two impact factors there. I've been working closely with the secondary principals of the junior highs, Greg and Carrie, and Rhonda and now Jen, to talk about what that transition looks like to 7th grade. It's always been a focus area for general education, and it'll continue to be a focus area for all our students, including students with disabilities. And the last piece, too, is really a lot of close work with our Office of Professional Learning and Program Evaluation. So really working with teachers to understand and using that professional development to understand what is the difference between differentiation, accommodation, modifications. All those understandings have huge ramifications on our instruction and how we deliver our instruction on a daily basis. The teachers have responded well to that. There's obviously been a little bit of pause and change with COVID, but we're looking to get back on track and do some different things. And as Jess and Jen pointed out too, graduation rate is part of our district priority. So we have a couple different pieces here. If you look at the second row, all students with disabilities, the state sets a benchmark of 80%. That's something that we need to be hitting as a district. Not because we need to hit it, but most importantly, our students need to succeed and have the tools to succeed and be independent as learners when they graduate. So before 2018, our numbers are actually lower. We've seen an increase in that. And we expect that those students in that 10th and 11th grade year right now will further have a positive impact on that graduation rate. And this is a third part of our district priority, so we'll report on this mid-year and at the end of the year. All right, so with that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Bailey to talk about our response to COVID.
All right, so as you know, COVID has had a significant impact on our district in every way, shape, form, and manner. So we thought it was important for you to understand what we did, A, during that closure, and B, where we are now. One of the most critical things that occurred during that closure is we had almost 1,000 CSE and 504 meetings throughout that closure. That was a huge lift for our office. Remember, they were all home too. So making sure that those meetings went off without a hitch was amazing. And I can't say enough about our school psychologists that stepped up to the plate and ran several meetings. They actually ended up taking on more than we anticipated, and they wanted to, and they did a great job. We also held all those 4-go-5 meetings for our CPSE incoming kindergartners. And so when you look at 1,000, I can, where does 1,000 come from? We don't have that many students with disabilities. But again, we had to re-have meetings for students that had already had annual reviews. We had to have all of those, plus our out-of-district, plus our 504 meetings. So it was a significant undertaking for our office, and nobody at any time complained or said, no, we can't do this. We just picked up and off we went. Our students continued to have contact with their special education teachers and related service providers, and that was one of the things that both parents and our staff said really helped them through that closure for that connection and to ensure that we were able to continue moving in a forward direction. One of the implications is Medicaid. We did not bill, as many other neighboring districts, we did not bill for our services during the closure. There were a lot of things around those regulations. We have been working very closely with Medicaid and our provider outside to make sure that we are able to bill now for the fall, and we've made adjustments as we go along. Still a little clunky at times, but we're figuring that out. We've continued to have constant, again, collaboration with our regional partnership and the New York State Office of Special Education to ensure compliance and providing quality instruction. And we are continuing and we have developed and will continue to develop protocols on how to evaluate students and keep our progress going. One huge thing that we did see was a significant increase in parent participation in CSE meetings. More parents attended CSE meetings. We saw them take a break from work and run out in the hallway or run into the next room. And so that was huge. I think anytime we can get a parent or student involved in the CSE process, that's important. And we've also found some great efficiencies in our practice. Andy will be happy to hear that our mileage checks have gone from about $200 a month to about $20 a month. And that's because we can run those CSE meetings right from our office. I can run a meeting from Rochester School for the Deaf at 1 and run a CSE meeting at Vollmer at 1:45 from my office. So really, we're able to do those things. We will continue to work with parents and staff on how best to meet the needs of students, and we will make amendments as needed. And as we said, there has been some shifting in our office. My assistant retired, and we did reassign one of our TOSA positions back into the classroom where we felt that they would have a greater impact on students. So obviously losing 2 people from our office has caused us to do some shifting. So as we said, Jen has graciously taken over the CPSE piece of it. So she's really focused now on CPSE through K3. I have taken on the 4-6, and Dave continues to work 7 through 12 and has taken on the transition. We also have finally been able to fill the second behavior specialist position, which has been critical for our students. And his focus really is our NISA programs, which is the alternately assessed, and it's important to remember that they are here all 4 days. So while he focuses on that, while Chris Malley focuses on our NISA program, Lindsay Titus has really been taking over a lot of the other pieces, and that they have found that to be a great division. So as always, we have next steps, and we will continue, as always, to analyze our continuum of services and to provide the best supports moving forward and try to meet those state targets. We will continue to do walkthroughs with our program directors and our building administrators to support practices around scaffolding, differentiation, and specially designed instruction. And again, we're going to start those conversations around modifying curriculum assessments and effective use of paras to ensure that we're using everybody to support students. We have begun a program evaluation to determine the effectiveness of ICOT. We are working with the Office of Professional Development for that. We will continue to do a cost analysis to examine special education programming with and without ICOT. We'll continue to review the potential for increased programming in district. We want to make sure that we have provided as many opportunities as we can for students to be educated right here in Rush-Henrietta. And we will continue to work with our state and regional partners for our designations for disproportionality as a focused intervention district. We do have 2 designations right now, and we are at risk for a 3rd. So our 2 designations, one is for our over 1% cap of NISA students. As you know, that is the state target for NISA. We have had conversations with the region because I don't know of a district that actually meets that target. So we are working as a region to talk about what are some pieces that as a region we need to address. And that may be something that actually goes above and beyond special education and hits offices such as the superintendent and BOCES. Because programs around, like Mary Carriola, require us to identify as a student as NYSA eligible in order to take that student on. So does that cause us to identify a student as NYSA too early? So those are conversations that we're having. Another disproportionality that we have is our over-identification of Black or African American students as intellectually disabled. We have been providing a great deal of professional development to CSE chairs and school psychologists on the 13 categories and ensuring that we are working through that designation. I am proud to say and will say that while there is that lag in state reporting, I believe our latest numbers show that we will come off of that target as long as those numbers stay where they are. Obviously, if students move in, those are some pieces that we will continue to assess. In our latest well, it's not a designation, we've been notified that we are at risk for our white students in out-of-district placements. So we will be looking more closely at that. Right now, we have 38 students that are in out-of-district placements that are in the subgroup identified as white. So we will look at those programs as well. And then we want to ensure that we are always promoting culturally responsive educational practices. And I sit on the steering committee for equity and inclusion, and we certainly feel that those are pieces that we want to make sure that everyone is keeping in mind as we go forward. Any questions? Oh, only a couple minutes over.
Is there anybody at the table? Yeah, hang on. I just want to make sure anybody at the table have any questions. Okay. I know Jennifer does, so we're going to try and make this work.
Sure.
Go ahead. Oh, wait, May, do you have questions?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, you have a question?
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Are you ready? What are the percentages of students of color, either African American or Hispanic, that are right now labeled as special ed? Do we know the number? And what are we doing to help them come off of the classification?
Great question. I do not know the number off the top of my head. We can certainly get that information for you. And just as any student, we look at those goals and work with the special ed teachers and related service providers to ensure that they are closing those gaps and meeting those goals.
Okay. I just have a couple questions, Jessica. Thank you guys for your presentation. It was great. I'm an ICOT teacher this year, and I'm 100% remote because I'm an RCSD teacher. And I do an ICOT class. And it kind of shocked me to see that most of the instruction for the remote academy, most of it's done, if it's an ICOT, it's done by the general ed teacher. Why isn't the ICOT teacher more involved, especially with planning the lessons and delivering them? Because I know technology actually is working because we're able to, like, we're team teaching, which was what an ICOT room should be doing. And I'm giving instructions, but then she's also stopping and modifying it. How come that's not done in the remote academy?
So those pieces are put in place. They are providing some small group instruction. They are working with the general education teachers and with the students directly to provide those pieces. And then we also have paras that are supporting small group instruction as well.
But if it's an ICOT room, shouldn't there be the two teachers in the room at all times?
Yeah, so our ICOT IEPs read an hour and a half for the week, so they are still meeting those targets.
But that's not an ICOT, that's a consultant teacher then, isn't it?
No, that is part of it. It is a team model, so that they're providing some instruction, again, in smaller groups.
Okay, if you walk into a good ICOT room, you won't notice the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher working with specific students. They're working with a general group of students. And I just don't want that stigmatism that, if teacher X comes in, she's working with Sally because she's got a label. I mean, that kind of concerns me.
Agreed, and those, both in the hybrid and the RLI model, those small groups are flexible.
Okay. Okay, and one more question. When you were showing by the numbers, I had a question about the 7 and 8 from 2017 and 18. It said that there were 31 students, and you only accounted for 25 of them. What happened to the other 6 students?
So the other 6 students moved out of district. That were in those special classes.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Are you good, Jennifer? You got all your questions answered?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
You got all your questions answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Anybody else at the table? I'm sorry, there you go.
It's okay.
May, go ahead.
Thank you for the very thorough and detailed presentation. I bet it's a lot of work.
May, can you pull the microphone closer, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the information presented. I have a question about the students who got declassified, and have we been able to monitor their success? You just, because you probably understand that we don't want to just take put them in another box and not see that they are successful. That's my first one. The second one is, our goal is to have students in the least restricted environment, but my concern is that the best environment for them? And how were we monitoring that? Is it through assessments? Are we keeping track that child or the students is actually maintaining the skills to help them be successful, even if they're not in a special classroom? And I have one more question, but I can't see it, but go ahead.
Okay. First of all, the declassification question is a great question. We do have a declassification process, and we certainly ensure that those students are continued to be monitored for the remainder of this year. And we usually are still dipping into them for the following year as well as they make that transition to the next grade level, because we certainly don't want them to fall through the cracks. So we do keep an eye on them. We have conversations with family to reiterate too, that ensure them that if they're not continuing to make that progress, we can always come back to the table. Some students are also, they are provided a 504 accommodation plan as part of that declassification if there are certain classroom accommodations that we feel still need to be in place at that point. That was the first question. The second question was about least restrictive environment. So as an example that Dave gave for the secondary, we talked about those specific students that shifted from special class to ICOT. And I can tell you, out of that 7th grade class, there were 16 students, because we filed a variance for that class. So there were 16 students that were shifted from special class to ICOT. And 3 of those students, 5 students struggled a little bit, 3 of them really struggled, and it empowered us to have some really good conversations with staff around why. What is it that's holding those 3 students back? But really enforcing the fact that there were still 13 students that ICOT was working for. So it, again, allowed us to have that conversation to say, did we truly engage in that process of determining the least restrictive environment for these students that have been sitting in a special class without their general education peers, especially considering how successful they've been outside of that special class. So we are continuing to have those conversations. We're continuing to look at specific student concerns. When a student isn't performing or making progress, we sit down and talk about that specific student and their specific needs. Is it executive functioning? Is it organizational? Do they need some changes in that curriculum or assessment? Are there other options that we should be considering?
I have one more question about looking at this year's model, ICOP model, and because I know there's fewer number of students in the classroom, have you seen more gain, positive gain, because they are in a smaller classroom? It's an ICOP model, but it's a smaller classroom, and is that an indicative of moving forward, maybe that's something we can consider. It could still be an ICOT model where they have the general ed students with them, but maybe a smaller number of students there.
Yeah, so we, having the smaller class sizes is every teacher's dream, right? You always want a room of 10 students. So, it has been that twofold. We're hearing kind of both of those pieces. One is, I want these kids more, right? We want them more. But at the same time, having a smaller group of students allows them to accomplish more in that shorter period of time. So while it's not ideal, our staff, again, is certainly making that work. And we continue to work, again, with how do we replicate that? The other piece is that we are seeing a significant decrease in behaviors along the way because kids are able to get more one-on-one attention because there's fewer students in the class. I will say, though, that with the ICOT, because of our small class initiative, but even having 18 or 19 students in a classroom with 2 certified teachers in there, plus at times there are paras in there to support as well, like that's ideal. And I really think that before COVID, we were able to provide that small group instruction in a full class.
Thank you.
I have a really easy one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nerlon.
No, I wanted Jessica to clarify a little bit in terms of our designation with the African-American boys in particular, with that designation in terms of too many are identified as intellectually disabled. If you can kind of give the board a sense of the numbers that we're talking about and some of the work that was done prior with the local region, and then what are the next steps?
Sure. So as we get a designation, in year 1, we do, it's a self-review. So we look at our processes and programs. At that point, we had 13 students that were identified as Black or African American and intellectually disabled. The thing about intellectually disabled classification, it's a very specific identification, and there are very specific measures that you need to reach. So you need to have an IQ of equal to or less than 70, and you have to also have significantly below adaptive skills. So your adaptive skills are your daily living skills. Are you able to take care of yourself? Are you able to function in the world around you? So you have to have both of those pieces. So that's very specific. And we've been having some very candid conversations both with the region and the state, because they'll ask me, how are you making progress on your identification of Black or African American students as intellectually disabled? Now, both our regional partners and our state partners have come in and done reviews with us, and they've said, you're doing everything you need to do. Again, it is a very specific classification. So our frustration has been, changing a student's classification to meet a state target doesn't seem ethical to me. So we're having those conversations. But in the meantime, we're still evaluating those students and having very candid conversations around, here's the 13 categories. Are there other categories we should be considering? So there are 2 other categories that students are falling into at times, but again, we're only changing those if the committee feels that that is an appropriate change in classification. So the other are multiply disabled, which is a comorbid disability with an intellectual disability and another disability, such as deafness, or I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's a few. So you have to have those comorbidity pieces in order to be identified as multiply disabled. The other is autism. And autism really has a wide range of students. You can have fairly high functioning students and fairly low functioning students. And again, so we're having those candid conversations about what really meets that student's needs to the best of our abilities and their abilities. Right now, our latest numbers, we believe we are down to 8 students, which will take us off that designation. Some of them have aged out. 1 has moved out. And at least 2, we have changed that classification, but we have also met on a few other students and not changed that classification because it was not right for that student. that help, Nilan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think Jennifer was getting at that. That's
Sure.
why.
And can you talk a little bit about what's the work that's been done in district to, I know you've been in talks with the state.
Yep.
To remedy that or work on that. What are we doing?
Sure. So the two designations that we have with the intellectually disabled and the NISA really are overlapping. So we are involved in what's called a targeted skills group for the state, and that is working with all stakeholders. We have a committee of administrators, psychologists, a parent, and is there anybody else on that committee?
A board member.
Well, a parent. She's there as a parent. A board member, but she's there as a parent. And so what we do is we're looking at root causes for both those identifications, but because they overlap, so a student really has to fall in that intellectually disabled, multiply disabled category to identify or to be eligible for NISA, the alternate assessment. So we are combining what we're doing to hit both of those targets at the same time. And so that's, it's again, really having some great conversations. We're having conversations around how do we identify those students? Are we identifying students of color at a rate that's higher than our other subgroups? And so that's good work that's being done in district and with our regional partners.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, my easy question. I have been reading through all this, and there's all these acronyms, and for the first time in a long time, there's one there that I can't really make heads nor tails of, because it's very easy, I think, but next to your title, Director of Special Education, you get grade 4 and 6, and then there's ODX. I think I know what it is.
Oh.
But would you?
Good catch. That's out of district.
I thought it was, but I just kind of went, because it has the X, I go,
We try to catch all those acronyms, but every once in a while one slips by.
That's all right. Well, there's so many that float around. I think that's what it is. All right. Thank you for answering that.
Yes.
All right. And any other questions for our special ed workshop from our wonderful team? We appreciate you coming and sharing this. It helps us have the knowledge to be able to help others too. Thank you for answering those questions. I would encourage board members, if you have any other questions regarding special ed, to share them with the superintendent, who will then be in touch with the team and they can get answers for you. Because I have a feeling as we think through some of this, you might come up with some other questions as we go along. All right.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. All right, thank you.
Hear what question May asked, and it's really frustrating.
All right. Step out of this. Our next piece will be a read of some district policies. I'm sorry, Jennifer, that sometimes it seems like we have you and sometimes we can't hear. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I couldn't hear like conversations. I can hear the speakers, and that's it.
Okay.
I can't hear when everyone, like, if Nikki asks a question or May, I can't hear the questions.
Okay. So I'll try and remind folks to get as close and as tight to those microphones as you can, because you can hear when you're really close to the microphone, okay? All right, so Jennifer, we're moving on to the district policies, regulation and exhibits. First up is 11A. It would be the second read of some policies. Unless somebody has something very specific about any one of those second reads, I'm not going to go through them individually. Any questions on those? Then I will take a motion to approve those second reads into policy. I have James and Nikki. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries 6-0. This brings us to a first read on some policies. I'm going to get those open so I can go through them one at a time. All right, so first up would be policy 5311.6. Any questions on that one? Anything? Okay. Takes me a little bit longer to flip through versus paper. All right, next one would be
I just have a
5312.
question.
Yes.
I remember from last time, I thought we were moving from just using parents and putting it at parent guardian, I think. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so I think so.
I think we decided that we would.
Did we miss one, or?
Yes, first page.
Of 5311?
Teachers and parents behave.
Are you on the 5311 or the 5312?
5311.6.
Okay.
Where is that?
First paragraph, where it says teachers and parents.
Oh, yeah. First paragraph, second sentence.
Second sentence, yes.
Near the end of the second sentence.
That is a quote from a book, so we really can't change that.
Gotcha.
Okay. Then we will move ahead to 5312. Any comments on that? 5314-R. 5330.
I was curious in 5330, in the provision on, I can't find it right now on my screen, under interrogation of police, and I'm just curious about the rationale to change authorized to invite, the use of the word invite. What was the thinking there? Because invite seems to suggest an affirmative act on the part of the district, and I was curious about that.
I think that was the intent, because there's been some clarification over the last 10 years or so that once we have invited, in other words, we called the police or asked them to come on the premises, they take over. It now becomes a police matter. So I think that word was carefully chosen, Nurlan.
It's on the last page under
Yeah,
interrogation
invite, you had
of
made that
student
change.
by
I
police.
believe it's because that is formally what we're doing by calling the police in. It then becomes a police investigation with the school.
Right, they have to be called in first, and once you call them, they come into the school, then they do that. But I don't remember that
It's a little more, you changed it from authorized, it's a
Yeah.
little more precise than authorized.
Okay, I was just curious, thank you.
All right, everybody's still good with that? All right. 5431. 5431-R. So I'm trying to scroll and make sure Jennifer doesn't have a question. So 5500-R. Nice long one with some red. 5680. All right. That is our first read of those policies. They'll come back for a second read in the near future. All right, that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Okay, there were 2 items that were submitted as written items for your consideration and review, one of them being an updated enrollment projections report. Before I open it up for questions, Pat, do you have anything that you want to share? Any key points or highlights?
Yeah, just a couple. We'll be having our full report from the Instructional Space Committee at our January 12th meeting. But I did want to highlight, in the projections, you'll notice that one of the key areas we're continue to keep our eye on is the imbalance in growth between the burger feeder pattern and the raw feeder pattern. And what we're seeing is, especially at Vollmer, we could be looking at a situation where we will be short of classrooms potentially. So that is something that the committee has developed some recommendations for the board to consider.
Any questions related to that report?
I guess I just have one question. Overall, I'm curious about, I guess, kind of the methodology by which the numbers are arrived at, and also, how accurate have they proven out to be? What's the track record like, essentially?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we review with the committee, usually at our second meeting. And of course, Keena Smith now has taken over for Karen Milburn after a number of years. The methodology we use is something called the survival ratio, which is a statistic that demographers and folks that are in population predictions use. And that takes what we take is a snapshot of the last 5 years of enrollment changes at each grade level, at each school. And for each one of those micro data, you develop an average of what you can expect the enrollment to do from year to year. So for example, as students move from first grade to second grade at file, we take that data and we come up with an average, and it might be 0.9752 or something like that, which means that on average over time, you can expect the first grade population at file to decrease when it goes to second grade. And from that, we take a look at we take our projected, or we take our current enrollment numbers, and then we apply those averages year after year after year to come up with a 5-year projection. We don't go any farther than that, because once you get out past 4 or 5 years, the reliability is much less. But we can show you the data, and we share it with the committee every year. We've been pretty much on target. Like this year, I think we were off, Nikki, by what, 12 kids? And that's with COVID. So historically, it's proven to be pretty accurate.
Other questions related to the updated enrollment projections? Okay, thank you for that explanation. Certainly more information to come on that. The interscholastic sports report is really a written reiteration of what Tom presented to you at our last meeting. There is one point that I would like to note, and it's not anything that's in this report, but sorry, a little feedback.
Yeah.
We were notified by Section 5 today that winter sports are on hold. That includes low-risk sports as well. They've been postponed until January, so I don't expect that we will have word on what's going to happen with sports across the state until probably after the holiday break. But as far as Section 5 goes, they've postponed. So I wanted to make sure that was noted. Any questions on the interscholastic sports report for fall? Okay, then let's move into some oral updates. Some things to talk about, one being COVID testing. There has been no change in zoning out of the governor's office. We were yellow. We continue to be yellow despite rising cases throughout the county. We're hovering just over 7% currently, and our hospitalization rate is obviously of concern, as we're one of the highest communities in the state right now. So that's something that we're going to have to watch, because given the rising number of cases in Monroe County, we anticipate that it will be at some point inevitable that we move to orange. So with that in mind, we've already started testing, hence the e-news that was communicated to families and staff members last week. We are continuing to gather parental consent for testing, because this is a long-range plan that would have to be in place for, we expect, 4 to 5 months. if you remember, when we're in yellow, we were required to test 20% of our population for a period of at least 1 week. And in the event that those numbers were below the county average, then you did not have to test any longer. So for a period of time, we stopped testing, but as I said before, we're anticipating that we will have to go and resume testing once we go to orange. So we just decided to start that process this week. Testing has been very smooth. That's a testament to Nerlan Anselm and her team's leadership, the nurses and the folks at the building level. It's been very, very smooth. Staff have been very cooperative in terms of being willing to test. And we have a number of our students that are on campus whose parents have given us consent. However, like I said, we're continuing to gather that consent because we're going to need the lion's share of our families to give consent if we're going to do this long term. And even though there still needs to be a clarification on it, especially if we are expected to test what are categorized as new and unique cohorts, which means that you can't test the same group of people over and over again. So we have started COVID testing. We are going to get our testing done prior to the holiday break, and then we'll see what happens once we start school again in January. We had our first BAC meeting last night. That is our Budget Advisory Council, and kudos to Andy and his crew for all the work that they did to prepare for that. That is a mixed group of teachers, staff members, administrators, and community members that serve in an advisory capacity. As you know, some of you sit on that committee, some of our board members do. So you hear that conversation firsthand, but they serve in an advisory capacity as we're making decisions about the upcoming budget. There is no new information related to state aid. Andy gave a very thorough presentation along with Mary Ann on the first when we went through our program and service reviews. But what we do know is that there is a projected $8 billion deficit at the state level. Surprisingly, that's better than we anticipated. Last spring, we were told that that number could be as high as 15 or 16 billion. So in a way, I guess that's good news. But nevertheless, it will impact school funding because that's a lot of money. Having said that, we are very well positioned, but again, uncertainty remains, and it's all centered around what's going to happen with state aid. A 20% reduction has been talked about. That seems to be worst case scenario, and worst case scenario for us would mean a gap of about $10 million, which is a lot to cover. So, I'm not going to paint a doom and gloom scenario. In a typical year, we've been able to keep costs down. We have a solid growth rate, which is really going to help us. But this isn't a typical year, as we know. So the word that I'll use to describe the situation at this point in time is uncertain. And I was just on the House of Delegates Zoom this afternoon with the New York State Council of School Superintendents, and they didn't have any new information either. So more information to follow, but that's where we stand now. Our next BAC meeting is going to be on January 11th. We just finished resurveying and recanvassing parents so that they can select instructional models for the second half of the year. That window is now closed. So from this moment forward, we will no longer be allowing people to change their selections. And I think we had a little over 60 families that we just could not get in touch with and could not get confirmation. So in that case, we've kept those children in the same model, and the same rules apply. The window is closed, so we're not going to be switching students between models going forward. We had about 220 students request to go fully remote. And we had about 70 students request to move out of the remote learning academy and to go to the hybrid model, which would be 2 days of in-person instruction. But if you do that math there, you'll see that that puts us about plus 150 students going full remote. So we're still working out the details, but what I want to say is it is going to be inevitable that we are going to have to shift resources into the RLA in order to keep class sizes from being really, really high. All right, so there'll be more information coming on that, but I do want to be transparent. As we talked about, that's enough kids where we're going to have to move resources out of the hybrid model and into the RLA. So that's where we stand at this point, and we'll keep you updated as we get more information. We did have a cyber security incident. I did email the board this week to make you all aware. We learned yesterday that we had an incident that involved what's categorized as phishing. It involved several student accounts, and we used a private security firm to assist us in doing an audit so we could determine what exactly happened. I would not categorize this as a serious incident, and we are very fortunate in the sense that there is no evidence that any sensitive information has been compromised in any way. So I think that's important to say, and for those parents who may be watching, I'm not stating this to cause alarm. I just want to make sure that folks are aware. As a precaution, we are going to be changing all student passwords, okay, because that was what was recommended by the security firm. And so that process we're going to be communicating with families tomorrow. So we'll give detailed information about what happened, but then also how to go about accessing your new password. That's going to happen on Saturday as to minimize the impact to learning during the week. It will probably spill into Sunday, and then the idea is to be ready to rock and roll on Monday. Dina, is there anything that I left out?
No, I think just the most important thing, that students will need some assistance, because parents will need to go into School Tool to access the new information. It's not something we can send through an email. It's not something we trust sending through the U.S. mail, because it could take a little while to get there. So we'll be giving step-by-step instructions on how parents will go into School Tool, just like they go into School Tool to check out student assignments, find out who the teacher is, see a report card. So the good news is our parents are familiar with School Tool, but we will give explicit directions. We're even going to make a little video, so there's a visual too, and give step-by-step directions on where you can find this. So we will need some support. And if there are some parents and students that do not do it over the weekend, we have a plan in place for Monday for teachers and our librarians and tech TAs to help kids on Monday. So our goal is that we know Monday might be a little messy, but we have supports in place to help them on Monday.
Very good. So that information will be found on School Tool, and all the details that Dina just talked about will be detailed in the e-news that we send out tomorrow, along with a video tutorial for parents. And then we also have, as she mentioned, staff on call, so that if people get into a situation where they're unable to access the password, that we would have our LMSs available. The last thing that I want to talk about is this. You know, I gave you an update on COVID testing, and we felt very fortunate that the governor's office listened to what was coming out of the field in terms of, you know, the requirements initially when you move into orange and red were extremely rigid, and we communicated that, and we communicated our want and what we felt to be the need to stay open, and we communicated what we would need to have in place in order to do that. And you know, to his credit, and his team's credit, he did listen, and he expressed the same sentiment as you've heard, that he wants schools to stay open. So that's a big deal, and like I said, testing has gone really smoothly, but we still are struggling a bit with staffing at this point in time, and that remains a threat to really all schools in our region, and it's something, you know, after the conversation we had today with NISCUS, speaking with superintendents across the state, it's something that most districts are struggling with right now because of the number of positive cases, but then even more so because of folks that are quarantined. So I asked Pat to pull some data out of the Human Resource Office. And we have had, since fall, 23 positive cases, 53 staff members. This is a combination of teachers and staff members, 53 who have been quarantined, and we currently have 61 who have had to take advantage of, at certain points, of the emergency leave provision that's afforded teachers and staff members right now. Now, not all these folks are out at the same time. Many of them have returned to work at this point. But I'm sharing this data with you so that you can see the numbers we're talking about and have a sense of what type of impact that has on the overall operation, especially because what tends to happen is it gets concentrated in certain departments and certain buildings. And so unless it became really widespread and really broad, I don't know that it would force us to shut the whole operation down, depending on you know, in transportation, it could. Food service, it could. But certainly, when you start to see clusters like that happen in a building, you could understand why you've seen throughout different regions situations where people had to shut a school down for a week, or in some cases when they're unable to transport, they had to shut the district down. So I think I'm very optimistic about what's happening with testing and the new requirements as we probably will transition into orange. We are very thin as it relates to staffing across the board right now. So I just want to put that on the radar. Did I miss anything, Pat?
No, not at all. The one thing I will add, though, I think that's important for the board to know is, and the public, is that one of the things that's saving us in terms of the instructional program is, ironically, the ability for people to work remotely. And I have to give much kudos to our teaching staff especially. We have many teachers that have been quarantined that have been willing to continue working from home, both the RLA and the hybrid model. And that honestly has saved the instructional program, because we've reached points at different times when we otherwise would not have had enough substitutes to cover classes. So kudos to them.
So obviously, we remain committed to staying open for in-person instruction, but it's, you know, and it isn't unique to Rush-Henrietta. Everybody's just struggling a bit right now. So I wanted to talk about it here tonight so that you were aware of it. Any questions? That was a lot of information in a short period of time. Nikki?
I have two questions. The first one is orange. Did the protocol change where we have to close for 4 days by switching to orange and having to deep clean, and then we can reopen?
The protocol did change.
Okay.
So we will, in the event that we go to orange, we would not be required to have a minimum of a 4-day shutdown.
Awesome. Second question you might not have an answer to, but out of the 220 RLA that have chosen to move to RLA, is that concentrated in any one of the grade levels, K3, 4, 6?
It's spread out.
Spread out. Okay.
Yeah, I looked at Dina and Pat because they have been going through the numbers and looking at it at a much more detailed level than I have.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? May?
So Monday, the screening tool did not come through, and honestly, I thought it was just me. I half asleep deleted the email, but I went online and I saw a parent saying that if you click on Fridays, it actually changes the date for you, so that's what we did. So just in case moving forward that happens again, and I've seen the new one change a little bit, is that because we're using a different provider, or it just like a modification in the system itself? And moving forward, what do parents do actually if that happens again?
Sure. I'm going to speak to it, and then I'll let Nurlan, I could see her. She got her mask ready, and she was ready to go. But I just want to say a couple things. So it's funny because I started to get emails really early that morning. And, people were saying, I can't access the screener. And then I did the same thing. I looked for mine, and I said, well, I didn't get it either. So we must have an issue. And then we began texting and whatnot. I made a conscious decision. I was aware that you could go back into an old email and access the screener, but I didn't want to tell people to do that because we weren't going to be able to communicate it broadly in time. And also, I felt like it would do more to stress people out if they felt like it was still going to be a requirement and if they weren't able to find an email to access it. So the directive that we gave that morning was just to self-monitor, and if your child had any symptoms, to keep them home. But going forward, that's something we've talked about, is that we could communicate that in the event that there's a glitch in the system. That is a way to access the screener, assuming that you could get to an old email. I'm gonna spin it to Nurlan because she probably has a couple things that she wants to add.
So just real quick, because this screener was first put together, thrown together by the third party, many districts who have been using this, and even us, there's a group of individuals who were asking for specific function that at the time, when they quickly put it together, they didn't have. And to respond to all of the requests that were coming from different districts in terms of ways to print it better, how to access the information quicker, they made that change during the weekend. But with technology, you do one thing and you don't recognize that it's affecting something else. So we weren't the only districts who were affected. They have partners in California, and they reassured me that all of these districts got affected. So at 6:30 in the morning, I was calling Texas, which is where our vendors are, and letting them know that we were experiencing that issue, if they could fix it. They reassured me that it was going to be fixed. And what I like about this vendor, once they make a pledge, they meet the goal. And that this morning you saw the questions did not change. It's just instead of vertical, you get a landscape kind of shape. But what I told the vendor, they felt really bad about this. I said, here's the thing. You always got to look at the positive of any issues that occur. What that told me, because I didn't hear any bugaboo, because remember when we first started, everybody was saying, we need the screener's an issue. And then for a long time, for 2 to 3 months, you didn't hear anything. And so what that told me when that happened, so many people were talking about it, that I'm like, it is so awesome to hear that so many people are serious about taking that screener. They're taking temperatures of their children, and they're going into the form and completing it appropriately. So I told the vendor, don't stress about it. It gave me some data in terms of how seriously people are taking it. Because at first, that wasn't the sense, because we heard the complaints, but now it just gives me a positive vibe, which is good.
Any other questions regarding anything that I discussed in my report?
One in the audience.
Do you want to come to the mic?
You mentioned that when you, in regards to discussing with the state, that you talked about information coming from the field.
Yes.
You mentioned that once you explained restrictions and other information coming from the field. I'm wondering if any of that information was relative to either parent feedback or other statistics that you shared that showed that other data relative to the low risk for students and leaving the schools open? Or was it primarily solely focused on the added restrictions or rigor that you would have to put in place in schools?
Sure. So let me go back and clarify. So the feedback that we gave as the superintendent's group was given to the county executive and the county public health commissioner. And then through a recommendation memo, they communicated directly with the governor's office. But the scope of our conversation was strictly focused on the current requirements for schools heading into the orange zone or beyond.
It's disappointing that there wasn't any pushback on the level of risk for kids to be in school full-time, or what is the risk, and pushback on the amount of testing and what the testing results showed. That's disappointing. The second question I have is, I'm wondering, based on the information I found and read about, it sounds like schools across this country, because of the increased failures, Fs and Ds, that they're changing some of the grading policies. And I'm wondering if any grading policies are going to be changed, have changed, are going to change, and in particular, if more children are going remote, if that's going to sway anything.
So let me respond to your concerns about the conversation that we had with the Department of Health and the county executive first. We've talked before. We've had this conversation before. So you know where we all stand, that we all want students to be here full time. But as I said before, that is not part of the conversation right now. And it's not going to be anytime soon. And it's quite simply because, not because we don't want it to be, and not because we don't want kids here full time, but it's because of health and safety reasons. When you're seeing those spikes out in the community, and the concern that we talked about in the community around hospitalization rate, and then how that spills into school, and because we have the requirements in place around us only being able to have a certain number of students in a defined space at a time, and because we have requirements around what we can do as far as transporting students, like I said, it can't happen. So in that conversation, when we're giving the governor feedback, it's absolutely, positively a non-starter right now. And I know that that's disappointing, and I wish that I could say there's a glimmer of hope right now that we're going to be able to do this soon, bring all of our kids back full time, but it's just not the case. It's just not the reality that we're living. Like I said, when I'm having conversations, I was on a Zoom with Dr. Mendoza at noon today. That is not the scope of our conversation, and unfortunately, it's just not going to be for at least the foreseeable future.
I hear you, and I appreciate that, and I disagree, and I'm not here to argue about it. I'm just here as a parent, and I know I'm speaking for many other parents that would disagree with that in terms of where children are safest, and the requirements from the state don't require both 6 feet of social distancing if you're wearing a mask. So I respectfully disagree, and I'm here because I'm speaking, I'm trying to do the right thing because I feel we're doing wrong. And I'm not saying that the Board of Education or the administration doesn't care for our children, but I'm here to respectfully disagree with that. And lastly, based on the number of students that are switching from in-person learning to the remote, does that open up any opportunities for children who are going 2 days a week to come more frequently because now there is more space?
Yeah, it does not. It would not give us enough flexibility in terms of physical space in buildings to allow students to come more than 2 days a week. We still have to keep those cohort numbers limited in order to be able to keep students distanced. So yeah, we're just not in a point where we're able to do that. And like I said, I'm a parent too. And so I can appreciate your passion for getting kids back to school. It's just, it's just a non-starter right now. And I hope that that changes, but I think we have to get through this winter. I think we have to see what happens with the distribution of vaccinations and how that impacts the spread of the virus, and then we'll see where we are. But at least in this window of time, looking probably at a minimum 4 months out, it's I don't know how to put it any other way than to say it doesn't fit into the reality that we're living at the school level right now. It's essentially an impossibility. But like I said, I feel your pain, and I don't want you to think that we're not listening. We certainly are. It's just there are limitations to what I can propose and what we can do. We are looking at Dina's team is doing a detailed analysis of what we're seeing with the first quarter grades. We just finished our school improvement planning. We quite honestly didn't see the swings in terms of failures, at least on the surface, that I expected. But we want to go a little bit deeper so that we can have that conversation with the board and the community about what we're seeing. You had okay, did I answer all your questions?
The grading.
Oh, are we looking to use that information to adjust our grading policy? We're in the process of getting a bit more detail. I would say based on what I saw, I didn't see anything in the school improvement planning process, because what we do is Dina and I will meet with every single principal. They write a school improvement plan, and so we look at all their data and we have those conversations. And I didn't see anything in going through that process that would suggest that we need an overhaul of the grading policy. But I think we'll see where we are once we get a little bit more detailed information. Anything to add there, Dina?
As far as the grades go for first quarter, I'm happy to report that many of our students are performing in line with what they've done previously. There are some students that are adjusting to not being in school as often, or learning the hang of the remote environment, so forth. What we did see a little increase in at the secondary level is incompletes, not necessarily the students struggling to do well on an assessment, but getting the assessments completed. So we've put interventions in place for providing opportunities for students to get their assessments done. We did do a thorough review of our assessments at the secondary level over the summer, because we want to make sure kids are still engaged in learning. We still are accountable by the state to teach standards. We are still accountable by the state to give them a high-quality program that ensures that they are earning that course credit. Right now, the regions are still online for June, as well as 3 through 8 assessments, so we still need to teach and we still need to assess. However, we did make modifications to the assessments that we give, the length of them, making sure we're focused on essential standards and so forth. So there has been adjustments, and every quarter we evaluate that to see which way we need to go. The most important thing is we need to keep up with it. We can't just kind of say, oh, you're in hybrid remote, only take one test this quarter. That would not be in the best interest of students, because assessment is learning, and the way we know that our students are meeting the standards, the way we know what interventions are needed, when we know we need to go back and reteach or we need to enrich. If we don't give them assessments, then we don't have that information. So what we did is we continue with our assessments, but we modified the length of the assessments, the types of assessments, and we're making sure that the assessments that we give are practical, manageable, and equitable. So we've done a little overhaul of the assessments, and that is K-12, but most significantly at the secondary level, because the students are taking those assessments more independently. As you know, we're taking them all online. We don't want our students to be spending their in-person days taking tests all day, so the assessments are being done online to take advantage of the virtual days, so that the teachers can take advantage of the in-person days to do more instruction. We do not feel as though there needs to be a need to change the grading percentages or curve grades at this point in time, because what we learned from last spring as well as what we're seeing from the first quarter. Kids are able to perform and still meet standards for us to use our current grading practices and structures.
If you were to make any changes, would you share that with the parents?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes, yeah. But at this point in time, no, we don't foresee anything.
Thank you. You will continue to see me despite what you say. I will
I hope
return
so.
with the
I
data,
mean,
and I'll keep pushing for my kids.
No,
for all of
I
our kids.
appreciate you being here. I appreciate the feedback. And on my end, like I said, I get it. I'm a parent too. But on my end, I just want to be totally honest and totally transparent about, the conversations that I'm having at the state and county level, and what we can do and what we can't. And I don't want to be misleading in any way to have people think that right now we're able to, that we're anywhere close to being able to bring back our students full time. Like I said, we're trying to hang on to Christmas break and not be in a situation where we have to go full remote. That's the reality of where we are. And I just want to be honest about that. But like I said, I hope to see you here at every meeting, so that we can have these conversations and so that you're in the know. We appreciate you.
Thank you. The kids are suffering. I see it at my house, just like my friend said. I won't get into detail, but I see it. So thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions for me, then that would conclude the superintendent's report.
All right, great. Any questions for him? Perfect. All right, this brings us to board member reports. First up is the Monroe County School Board Association Legislative Committee. I was waiting for my Zoom link and didn't get the email that there was no meeting. They canceled it. So the meeting was supposed to be an opportunity to speak with newly elected representatives, and because they did not get a commitment from any of them, only a possible aid from one of the representatives, they decided to cancel the meeting and not waste folks' time, especially in the month of December. I did send you some bullet points of an email that was sent out by the co-chairs of that regarding some advocacy that we would like to follow through with. So I'm hoping if you have any thoughts regarding those items, that you would share them with me so I can get them into those co-chairs. I will say that our executive director of Monroe County School Boards is very active, and her report showing all the different things that she is advocating for on our part for us, reaching out to representatives, trying to help us with reimbursements for transportation and legislation for the free broadband for folks, because so many families are struggling with that, and just a variety of different activities she's been involved with. So we will meet again in January to discuss some of those points that I shared with you. So let me know if you have anything you want me to report to them. All right? And the next would be the Monroe County School Board Executive Committee. We did have a Zoom meeting. Bo and I both attended. I would say it was just a regular meeting. I'm trying to pull up my notes. Oh, I guess the big thing was that there was a presenter there, Michael Bryant from the Band Against Bullying. They are a group out of Buffalo that utilizes music bands to promote activities that are against bullying. They sent us a couple of links for some YouTube pieces that we could view. I could send those to you if you would be interested. They're looking to expand into the Rochester area and looking for a commitment for folks to join in with them. The sense that I got from it, it's a lot of work to get into it. The message is great, standing up together, music bringing folks together, and helping our students fight against bullying, which could also really lead into some of our discussions about racism. But I just got the real sense it was going to be a lot of work, and I didn't want to make the ask do we want to participate in it when we're struggling just to stay together where we're at right now? I will send that link to you so you can at least see what it's about, and then, you know, maybe in the future, if it does come to fruition in this area, we could always join in at a later time, but I don't know how you felt about that, but I just thought it was a big ask right now for folks. And just the usual reports. Position papers are all up and updated and approved, and they're on the website for the County School Board Association. Any questions? All right. That brings us to Instructional Space Committee.
That's me. We met on December 3rd, and we went through the enrollment projections that were in the superintendent's report in great detail. And then we also went through our draft of our report that will be presented in January. And it was some really great discussion because the group really recognized the inequities that can occur when a school has 150, 200 more kids, like Roth and Berger, and, you know, the strain on counselors and social workers and psychologists, because you only get one per building, and when you're serving that many more kids, everyone's just strained. And they really talked at length about how we could possibly redistrict in small sections down the West Henrietta corridor. Because we actually got they were looking at numbers. I actually pulled up the old map from last year that they showed us, and where exactly like 100 kids could be moved back and forth between the two. But then there was a great length discussion whether if we start the redistricting at K3 or do we start it at 4-6. And it was a mixed bag between the parents that were there because, you know, people have strong ties to that K3 building, and the thought of changing that for anybody, I think it brings anxiety to a lot of parents. But then there were parents that were for starting at the K level. So it'll be a good report next month.
I can't wait for that one. This brings us to the Henrietta Youth Asset Team.
So the computer died.
Oh.
So Jennifer's obviously not there, and it's totally dead, so I can't turn it on. She said she did not get the link for the meeting, so she wasn't able to attend.
All right. Technology is not really working well for her right now.
No, not at all.
All right. Budget Advisory Council. Go ahead. You're the rep. I'm just an alternate.
Diane and I both were there last night. It was a rousing meeting of going through the program and service review again. So, but we had a great turnout of community members and parents, and some great questions, and I think it'll be a good group going forward.
I think they did well for being on the Zoom meeting and everybody being cooperative about asking questions. It worked well. And again, Andy, a great job with sharing all the details.
Thank you.
District Wellness Council.
All right, that was today, and I'll see if I can remember what I heard earlier. We had 2 guest speakers from RIT's Elm Study, and that stands for, I had to write all this down, so it stands for Eat Healthy, Love Yourself, and Move. And they are doing a study. Their question is, what is the best lifestyle choices for metabolic syndrome? And they said there's 5 factors, and if you have 3 of the 5 factors, that means you have metabolic syndrome. And they are doing it at 5 universities, right, Nerlon? And they, well, specifically, they're looking for anyone who's interested. They said they have to canvass a lot in order to get the people that meet the need. And Nerlon had some questions for, and you had to be 18 to join the study. The best part is you get to have all of this assessment, I guess I'll say, and meetings free, first of all, for 2 years, and they'll pay you when they come to assess you twice a year, and I think it's $40 per visit and $60 on the last one. But they have counseling. They have 2 different groups. You don't get to pick which one. One is home study. One is meeting. It starts out with once a week and eventually ends up to well, much less often. And they provide counseling and cooking tips. And she said the one thing that they don't get to do is eat the food that they test now because of COVID. But they're finding it to be really successful. And what else did they say in there? Oh, Nolan's going to get all the information from there so she can distribute it. She did ask for that. They're going to send it both virtually and papers, and she already has ideas how she's going to be getting that out to people. And they said they'd like to get as many people as possible, and they're really interested in people who don't typically have access to these types of programs, so that they, will have access and then have better study. Anything else you think of that?
No, I think you covered it. The main thing is to try to catch people before they develop diabetes and all of those other diseases, heart conditions. So they want to make sure that they help them if they have 3 of them or more risk factors.
It was a really good presentation, I thought. And I think
Health and wellness.
the only other thing, and again, that was from Nerland, was she said that the wellness series for the staff are going really well, and in the one that's currently happening, she said there's 80 people in that session, which is
great.
fantastic to hear. So thank you for doing that, too. And I think the rest, Bo covered in his report, so I don't repeat it.
All right. Is there anything else for the group? Okay. I just want to say before we go to recap, Bo and I had the conversation about keeping our eye on the numbers and our meetings, being able to meet in person. And so if we do go to Orange, obviously we will, it can only have 10 people, so we would have to make alternate arrangements for those meetings. We will try our best to get a means for public to be able to dial in for some questions, or the public forum piece. We will work on that to see if we can accomplish that piece. That's an important piece, as you can hear with a few that have been coming. It's important. So stay tuned. Hopefully, maybe after the break, I'm just playing my naive card. Maybe the numbers will go down. Although when I saw them today, I just about cried. And as I've mentioned before, my ICU nurse daughter, is very heavy heart. She's tired, and so please continue to wear your mask, continue to distance, continue to hand wash or hand sanitize, have small groups, because we want everybody to be able to gather in the future for celebrations down the road. So that's my pitch right now. Be safe. All right, recap.
All right, really short and sweet. So all items passed. Our first read policies are moved to second. Our next board meeting is January 12th, which seems like a really long time away.
Yeah.
And I hope everyone has a great holiday, and I think that's it.
All right. So then I will take a motion to adjourn our meeting. I have James and Nikki. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone. Great holidays to you.